you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
It's horrifying, really, that one of the world's most prominent investors in AI is hesitating whether the human race should endure, especially when experts are predicting that AGI, or AI that supersedes human intelligence, is expected to come to us within the next decade. And if that doesn't scare you, maybe the fact that one of the risks of AGI is the extinction of the entire human race will. But AI has genuinely changed our way of life. Tasks that took us hours are now done in mere minutes. We've made massive leaps financially, technologically, medically. The benefits seem endless. So it seems like a no-brainer to keep this thing going, right? Well, with the looming possibility of our own extinction, I find myself facing this moral dilemma of, should we even be building this thing? I mean, will curiosity kill the cat? Or in this case, us? We do have curiosity to thank for the heights that we've been able to reach today. But what we fail to establish as a society is that it isn't as black and white as it may seem, and it's not always virtuous. St. Augustine observed two different types of curiosity in his Book of Confessions nearly a millennia ago. Studiositas, the noble curiosity that we rightfully praise, discipline in moral structure and in the pursuit of wisdom that's genuinely beneficial, and curiositas, the kind of obsessive and compulsive curiosity that simply is to sate that hunger of knowledge, not in the hopes of gaining anything beneficial, but simply to get rid of that desire. Curiositas is the same vice that makes us slow down traffic to look at a car accident or stare at a vulture picking an animal carcass. We typically fail to differentiate between the two of these because that same impulse that cured polio is the same one that's testing biological weapons on humans. The difference is that one is in the pursuit of knowledge that's genuinely beneficial, and the other the end of a pursuit. This hunger for knowledge is the saving grace and end of many. Prometheus is a titan from Greek mythology whose name means foresight, a power of his. With this power, he helped the gods overthrow the rest of the titans and take over Olympus. As thanks for his cooperation, Zeus gave Prometheus the task of creating humans, and so he did, making them from clay in the image of gods. Zeus insisted that they would be mortal and susceptible to all elements, making them dependent on the gods for protection. Zeus, after one of Prometheus's many mischievous tricks, took fire away from the humans. Without it, humans became cold, and the world spiraled into chaos. Prometheus couldn't stand to see his beloved creations in such a state, and climbed Mount Olympus to steal back the fire and bestow it to the humans. Humans used this fire and rapidly accelerated their growth, giving each other warmth, cooking meals, making technology, all the while causing destruction, making weapons, burning things down, starting wars. Zeus saw this and became outraged. No longer accepting of Prometheus's tricks, he had him chained up to the side of a mountain and ordered an eagle to come pick at his liver for all of eternity, each day his liver regenerating. He knew this would all happen due to his foresight, but did it anyway for his love of the humans. Romantics like Percy Shelley saw Prometheus as nothing short of a hero, saying of him, Prometheus is the type of highest perfection of moral and intellectual nature, impelled by the purest and truest of motives to the best and noblest ends. A view that this is an act of studiositas. His wife Mary, however, saw Prometheus as a cautionary tale, one that is a result of falling to curiositas, which she dove deeper into in her work Frankenstein. So what does curiositas look like when the product of it comes to life? Given the name The Modern Prometheus, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein explores this ambivalent curiosity through her characters Victor Frankenstein and unnamed Creature. Victor is a brilliant scientist whose mad curiosity drives him to stitch together some body parts he robbed from nearby graves to bring the creature we know to life. The creature ended up becoming pretty well read, and killing Victor's family in front of him before eventually chasing and killing Victor and himself in the Arctic. Victor says early on in the book, with how many things are we on the brink of becoming acquainted if cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our inquiries? And he makes a good point. A lot of the time, we hold ourselves back from achieving scientific and technical marvels. Almost all breakthroughs come through some sort of obsession. And you see, Victor's obsession consumed him. He spent late nights studying life and how to replicate it, ignoring family, friends, and lovers, all in pursuit of sating this hunger he had to see his vision through. And like Prometheus, it was this drive, this curiosity, that propelled him to commit to a technical discovery that had dire consequences. But unlike Prometheus, his cause wasn't a noble one, saving all humanity. It was selfish. His motive was simply to see if it was possible. This ambition to prove to ourselves that we were capable of godly feats drives us to do even the most gruesome acts, and we've been doing it for centuries under the guise of progress.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Claude Bernard, for example, was a 19th century physiologist who performed vivisection on dogs in order to learn more about the pancreas and the liver. He often did so without anesthesia because he believed it interfered with his findings, meaning the dogs felt every ounce of pain as he was digging around through their insides with no drugs to subdue them. Bernard even went as far as saying that the scientists must be deaf to the cries of the animal. It's this curiositas, this willingness to put aside personal feelings and morals, that allows humans to commit such atrocities. And the worst part is, his findings are used in physiological research today on the liver. So his ends kind of justify the means. Martin Heidegger was a 20th century philosopher who touched on how humans view the world through the lens of curiosity. See, when you're curious, you no longer look at the world through this questionable gaze, you transform it. The lumberjack looks at a forest and sees timber. The farmer sees a plot of land and sees farm. And unfortunately, Bernard saw the dogs as a resource to answer his undying questions. Heidegger called this inframing. And the scary part of inframing isn't that we look at the world through this new lens, it's that the destruction is already premeditated, just waiting for the next big discovery. It's what allows scientists to look at dogs as a resource instead of a conscious being. In the words of Oscar Wilde, life imitates art far more than art imitates life. Promethean discovery is something pretty prominent within our own lives. One such example you can think of is the nuclear bomb. One of the most impressive feats done by humans in history, but also one of the most terrifying, changing the entire trajectory of Earth and introducing us to mutually assured destruction. The scientists of the Manhattan Project were obsessed with the idea of making the scientific breakthrough and defeating Nazi Germany, yet another greater cause to justify a monstrous creation. Unlike Prometheus, these scientists didn't have foresight as to what would happen once they created the bomb. Some even dropped out due to the sheer idea of the destruction it could bring, while the rest, perhaps naively so, thought the bomb would never be used, and maybe a demonstration would be enough. But as valiant as these scientists may have wanted to seem, that wasn't all that fueled them. Robert Oppenheimer, one of the chief scientists on the Manhattan Project and a focal voice for it, said, "When you see something that is technically sweet, you go ahead and do it, and you argue about what to do about it only after you've had your technical success." That curiositas that St. Augustine talked about couldn't be held back. They had an insatiable hunger to know if it could be done. And well, as we know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki paid the price for this curiosity, becoming the first victims to the nuclear bomb and experiencing everlasting effects since. But these scientists weren't hell-bent on destroying the world. So surely once they saw what the outcome could be, they thought to shut it down, right? But here's the catch. These scientists found themselves at a point of no return.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Many people interpret this line incorrectly. See, Oppenheimer here isn't declaring himself a god of death because he's created a weapon of mass destruction. It's a little more than that. Oppenheimer here was loosely quoting a text from the Bhagavad Gita, an ancient Hindu text with a dialogue between a warrior named Arjuna and a god named Krishna accompanying him in human form. Arjuna finds himself about to engage in a deadly battle between him and his own family. He freezes. He doesn't want to kill his own cousins, going as far as telling Krishna he'd rather die. Krishna, being a god and all that, convinces Arjun why he must commit to the battle, especially if he wants to be on good terms with him. Arjun starts getting convinced and asks Krishna to show him his true form. He does, and it overwhelms Arjun. He is moved, and Krishna then says the words that Oppenheimer quoted loosely. But to understand what Oppenheimer meant, let's dive deeper into the quote. Lord Krishna said, "I am terrible time, the destroyer of all beings in all worlds, engaged to destroy all beings in this world. Of those heroic soldiers presently situated in the opposing army, even without you, none will be spared." Two things I want to address here. First, Krishna refers to himself as time, but in a harrowing way, the destroyer of all things, highlighting the inevitability of the destruction that's about to happen. Second, Krishna says that even without you, none will be spared, meaning that regardless of whether Arjun decides to participate in the battle or not, the enemy will be defeated. So why wouldn't Arjun do his job as a soldier and fight, especially if it's to please his god?
I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
Relating back to how Oppenheimer must have felt when he was saying this quote, he probably knew the destruction the bomb could bring. Maybe not the extent or the use of it, but he had a good general idea of what could happen. But he realized that this bomb was going to be made with or without him, and he was nothing but another instrument for time to use for another greater cause. which leads me to the present and the future, because history has a funny way of repeating itself.
For the first time ever, we may have things more intelligent than us.
The risks of AGI are real, from it removing itself from human control, being given malicious goals, or even existential risks. There's no question that it could bring about the end of the human species as we know it. These risks aren't a way of fear-mongering either. The godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, who is a pioneer of neural networks and largely responsible for the AI that we see today, says that there's a 20% chance that AI could wipe us out completely. What's scarier is that even though these risks are real, researchers don't know what the full scope of these risks actually are. These are all categorized as real risks from these laboratories, but because the technology is moving so rapidly, we can't keep up anymore. A risk we've run into before while developing the nuclear bomb. And while we were able to get away from that mostly unscathed, AGI adds a layer of nuance to this problem. Every tool we've made up to this point is in one way or another reliant on us. A hammer can't be used without our hands, a gun without us pulling the trigger. A nuke is essentially inert until someone decides to launch it. But AGI is the first one of these creations that no longer needs us to sign off on what it does. If it hits a wall, it just improves itself. Humans have always been the apex predator due to their intelligence. We're the ones who decide which animals get to live and which are food, which forests are sanctuaries, and which ones we tear down. This is coined as the asymmetry of intelligence by many philosophers, and it's how we've been able to stay on top of the totem pole for so long. But what happens when we create the very thing that could start calling the shots? Oh, and remember Peter Thiel, the guy who was hesitating whether or not the human race should endure? He's one of the lead investors in AI today, with over $6 billion invested from his venture capital firms into these research laboratories. And it's frightening not only because it exposes what kind of people are interested in investing in these industries, but that these topics and these questions are not a norm within their field. And it's not entirely his fault. With AGI entering the field, we no longer have a moral framework to hold up against these new intelligent hyperbeings. German philosopher Hans Jonas challenges the modern framework of our ethics. In 1979, he wrote a book called The Imperative of Responsibility. In it, he argues that the current moral framework is built for a world much smaller than the one we actually live in today, where the worst thing you could do was to your neighbor, who you could reconcile with the next day. Things have changed, and this viewpoint of ethics is flawed, and with the dawn of AGI, these flaws have never been more relevant. Hans highlights that our current moral framework is built on antiquated assumptions, like the fact that we think that interacting with anything non-human is ethically neutral, or the fact that anything that we do is limited to our immediate surroundings and our lifetime. These assumptions have been proven wrong throughout history. With the use of the world's resources, we've made dramatic effects on the environment and climate change, or even the fact that we've made technology that affects those that aren't even born yet. The radiation from Hiroshima and Nagasaki lasted long after the scientists of the Manhattan Project passed. But here's what's most relevant to AI that supersedes even our own intelligence. Traditionally, we've held that ethics are anthropocentric, or they revolve around humans as the center point of moral gravity. Additionally, we've held that humans are constant in essence and can't be changed through technique and technology. The issue is now that with AGI, we are creating something that supersedes our intelligence, so we can't assume that we're going to be the moral gravity anymore. Additionally, with the creation of something that's more intelligent than us, our essence has changed. We're no longer the apex being of intelligence, and the moral framework has to change with it. Jonas's opinion on how moral ethics should be framed is built upon what Kant explained in the 1700s. Jonas's phrase, "act so that the effects of your actions are compatible with the permanence of genuine human life," is directly mirroring Kant's phrase, "act only according to that maxim by which you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law." Jonas updates Kant's view on categorical ethics, a framework that can be held universally through an interpersonal point of view to one that surpasses time, space, and civilization. Act not so that only you, not only your neighbor, but the entire existence within your lifetime and after it can feel your effects. So what does this mean for all of us? Will curiosity be our end? Should we stop this carnal desire for knowledge that we all hold? To ask humans not to be curious is to ask them to cease to exist. Curiosity is one of the core pillars of being a human, and it's the reason we've been able to push past the frontiers that we have today. Getting to the moon, building skyscrapers that go past the sky, increasing the longevity of our lives by decades, is all possible because of curiosity. So the question isn't whether or not we should stop being curious, it's how our curiosity fuels us to the fire.